Whakalofalahaiatu and welcome to our bulletin for BCN News. Tonight we begin with a tribute to the Fale Fono. Yesterday, former and current members of the Fono Ekepule and the staff who used to work at the Fale Fono gathered to celebrate her one final time before the closing of the doors on the 43-year-old Parliament building.
Honourable members, I am fully aware of the task and the duty that I'm about to perform, and I do so with a sense of humility, I do so with a sense of honour, but with a tinge of sadness. Honourable members, let us therefore take a moment to reflect on those who came before us, those people who sat on the very seats where you're occupying now, and those who worked behind the scenes. Some of those are no longer. In fact, quite a lot of them are no longer with us. Let us remember them all. May they be our anchor for the past and our compass for the future. Honourable members, for the very last time from this place, this House stands adjourned.
Those were the final words of the Speaker, Hima Douglas, closing the final sitting of the Whānau Kepule at Fale Whānau yesterday. Current and former members of the Whānau Kepule and staff who used to work at the Fale Whānau over the past 43 years were invited to a function to farewell the Parliament building that has served Niue well for the past 4 decades. Over the years, and with several cyclones, including a Category 5 Cyclone Hatta 18 years ago, has weathered and damaged the building. This building has seen and heard the footsteps of 6 premiers, 7 speakers through 17 assemblies. Premier Dalton Tangilangi spoke to Soraya Mangawa about closing Fale Whānau and his personal reflections on this historic moment.
You know, my pa, Robert Rick Sr., so Robert Rick Sr., and then my dad was the speaker, who all started at the time, and now that era has come to an end. And I just happened to be in the leadership role when we end all this, so it's a mixed feeling. I remember coming to this house when Pa Rex was here and my dad's speaker office on the corner, run around the skid. But this place is sacred in the days. I come to Ma across the road. I don't come often here because this place was so respectful. Today, we don't see that. So I want to bring us back to the old traditional way of being respectful to one another.
I spoke to one of the longest-serving members of Parliament in Common Role member, Honourable Olaf Jacobson, who reflected on her time as a new Member of Parliament and the Fale Whānau as her training grounds in politics.
Somewhat sad, because this is where I met most of the matuas and the people who came into politics in all that time, and I think this is where I learnt the most, because with the older people, they leave behind some very nice stories, which I won't tell you on television, but they're just too funny. But they keep me going, and I think it's the fact that because I was the youngest member, and I think it was only about 30-something when I got into Parliament, and I've watched all sorts of people come and go, and I've watched the events that have taken place in this house. So for me, it's somewhat sad.
The Fale Whānau was a gift from the government and the people of New Zealand. The words on the plaque commemorating the opening of the Fale Whānau have faded over the years, but you can still read the inscription. Officially opened in October of 1977 by then New Zealand Prime Minister Sir Robert Muldoon in the presence of Premier of Niue Robert Rex and the members of the Niue Assembly. It is not clear what will happen to the original Fale Whānau, but Premier Tangilangi says that it will not be pulled down It will be renovated.
I have no intention of pulling this building down. If anything, I wanted to renovate this building for the future generation like yourself, because at the same time, this place is known around the region and also the world. It's an iconic building, and I want to maintain it as a heritage building for us here in Niue.
The passengers who arrived on Monday's flight this week are the first intake of home isolations, where passengers go directly to their homes and self-isolate for 7 days. And last week, the Premier also announced that on Monday, the 27th of June, quarantine-free travel will commence with no restrictions on the number of passengers. Here's more on that story. On the News of the Week radio program last week, Premier Tangelangi announced the commencement of the quarantine flights on the 27th of June. But in the meantime, there will be a gradual relaxing of the travel restrictions and increasing the number of passengers before June 27th, starting with the passengers on Monday's flight not going into managed isolation or quarantine, but instead were to isolate in their homes for 7 days. Chief of Police Timothy explains the requirements for now with home isolation until QFT commences in June.
So they're going to come off the plane kind of like they normally would before COVID. They'll come off into the arrivals hall. They're in arrivals hall, they'll get a quick briefing and wait for all of the baggage to be unloaded from the plane. Once that baggage is unloaded from the plane, then they'll go through normal immigration processes, grab their bags, go through customs and biosecurity, and then they'll come out and get in their cars and go. What's also going to change is that health is not going to be going around doing the COVID tests, going to be utilizing the drive-up COVID testing. So on their days 1, 3, and 7, they are going to drive themselves to the hospital at a designated time and go through the COVID drive-through testing site. That will allow us to get the tests done a lot faster, because we'll have, instead of having health to go over to multiple different places around the island, and then they can be processed right away. So we don't want people to panic. If they see people out driving that came in off the plane on Tuesday, Thursday, or the following Monday before they get out of quarantine, they're supposed to be.
The 41 passengers from Monday flight are self-isolating in their homes in the villages of Alofi South, Tamakautonga, Avasele, Hakupu, Liku, Lakepa, Tuapa, and Makefu. On Tuesday this week, they all returned negative COVID-19 test results on their day 1 tests.
As the Premier's mentioned, we're moving towards quarantine-free travel. So this is a step in that direction. In a very short period of time, we're not going to have any quarantine at all. And so this is just, instead of going from one extreme to another, this is a stair-stepped approach to get to that quarantine-free travel. It also allows for us and health and people within the COVID committee, specifically health, to highlight anything that we didn't anticipate for quarantine-free travel that we need to do to make things work well when we get to quarantine-free travel. So it's kind of, there's a couple different purposes for it. It's to kind of ease us into quarantine-free travel, but it's also a safer way for us to figure out if there's any gaps in our planning that we identified as part of this process, so we can plug those before we get to quarantine-free travel.
In a press release earlier this week, the government also confirmed that the weekly flights will also start on the 27th of June. The number of passengers will not be restricted come June 27th, but all passengers wanting to travel to Niue must be fully vaccinated or, better yet, boosted. Passengers are still required to complete pre-departure tests before getting permission to fly to Niue. Meanwhile, the island remains in alert yellow as there is one case at the MIQ facility at Home Office. The active case is a close contact of the index case detected 2 weeks ago. The Niue Longbows and Niska debacle continues. Last week, the Niue Longbows called for the resignations of Niska President Maru Dalangi, Chief Demission Tony Edwards, and Vice President Sydney Louis over allegations of poor communications and lack of good governance in the preparation for the Commonwealth Games. Earlier this week, Niue Longbows President Des Heeper told BCN News that their team has not been finalized and they may not be going to the games. Here's more on the extensive coverage of this developing story.
The impasse between Niue Longbows and Niska has reached the Minister of Sport, Honourable Sauni Tongatule, who told BCN News yesterday that he has met with both the executives of Niue Longbows and Niska. He says that he impressed upon them to resolve their differences and ensure the athletes make it to the Commonwealth Games in July. BCN News understands that the friction between Niska Longbows and Niska has been brewing for some time. In a letter dated 27th of April, Niska Longbows called for the resignation of the president of Niska, Maru Talangi, and the two officials leading the team to the Commonwealth Games, Tony Edwards and Sydney Louis. Niska Longbows President Des Hipa said that they are extremely disappointed and deeply concerned at the lack of transparency and accountability and the poor governance of the national sporting body Niska. Featured in the letter are the concerns over the selections of the teams to the Commonwealth Games, the appointment of new members to the executive who are not affiliated to any sporting codes on the island, and poor financial reporting. The letter raised the concerns over the lack of transparency of the $48,500 provided for the development of the sports codes that will be heading to the Commonwealth Games. According to Niska Longbows, they have never received any of this funding, yet they make up the largest sports team heading to the Commonwealth Games and the only team whose members actually live in Niue. They are now calling on a full financial report of how this money has been spent. It's understood that the chef de mission, Tony Edwards, and general manager Sydney Louis had submitted to the Commonwealth Games a different team that was not authorised nor discussed with the Niska Longbows prior to the submission. BCN News contacted Tony Edwards for comment last week, but he did not respond. According to Niska Longbows, there are 4 athletes or 4 bowlers that are based in New Zealand who have been included in the Niue team, but they do not meet the entry and eligibility criteria. Will Bowls' current Commonwealth technical delegate, Kerry Clark, strongly advised the Niska Longbows and Niska to resolve this matter. According to Niska Bowls President Des Hipa, the Niska President, Maru Talangi, refuses to open the portal and to enter the names of the team from Niska Longbows to go to Birmingham. BCN News yesterday received a copy of what looks like the list of the Niue team to the Birmingham Games. The list showed that the names of the Niska Longbows team are not yet confirmed. The confirmed names on the list, though, are President Maru Talangi, President's guest Manasofai Talangi, Secretary General Sydney Louis, Chef de Mission Toniata Edwards, General Manager Brad Ikinepule, Boxing Manager Lorena Ikinofo, Boxing Coach Asasio Heimuli, Boxing Assistant Coach Lolo Jr. Heimuli, Boxer De Niro Powell, Boxer Xavier Ikinofo, Boxer Travis Taputuetoa, Boxer Duke Hollow Williams, Weightlifting Manager Ramsey Edwards, and Weightlifting Coach Clarence Kahantong. There was no named athlete for the weightlifting team, but in March, the Niue Weightlifting Federation announced on their Facebook page that they were contacted by the International Weightlifting Federation that Giovanni Toimata had received an invitation to represent Niue at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Giovanni Toimata's name is not yet on the list of the Niue team to Birmingham. Today, in a statement to BCN News, President of Niue Weightlifting Narita Viliamu Tahenga said that the Niue Weightlifting did not appoint the coach and manager to the weightlifting athlete. Giovanni is to travel with the Niue team but remains with his original coach, Simon Kent. According to the statement, Niska have stopped all contacts between Giovanni and herself as president of Niue Weightlifting. The federation have not yet updated with the athletes' progress. BCN News will continue to update on this developing story.
At the final sitting of the Whanokē Pule yesterday, Premier Honourable Dalton Tangilangi, as the Acting Minister of Finance, tabled the government's next recurrent budget for the financial year 2022-2023. The most important discussion of the first reading of the budget was the deficit of $2.5 million.
Today, on behalf of the Minister of Finance and Cabinet, I present the 2022-2023 budget to this new Assembly. Overall, Mr. Speaker, the budget promotes our health and economic resilience response to the global pandemic and external economic shocks, protecting the lives and the livelihood of the Niue people and fostering recovery responses. National security and climate change remain our top priorities because of our fragile population. For our global outlook, Honourable Speaker, slow economic growth globally during COVID has contributed to our stagnant growth in the past 2 years. The recent Russian invasion of Ukraine affected global fuel prices, resulting in increased fuel price worldwide, consistent with global freight costs increases. Global supply and value chain issues worldwide affects procurement with increased costs. Omicron variant caused many countries to impose restrictions to manage its spread and disrupting recovery responses.
This is the last budget for the Tangelangi government before the general elections next year. After the first reading yesterday, the draft estimates of the annual appropriations bill has been referred to the Public Accounts Committee for their deliberations before returning it to the Whanokepule for the second and final reading in June. The national sports governing body, Niska, is coming under heavy public scrutiny over their recent decisions, including the dismissal of 2 of their executive members 3 weeks ago. Today, Hagen Siosikefu and Christabella Kokasitalangi have spoken out in a statement to BCN News over their dismissal from the Niska executive last month. Both object to the allegations made against them and challenge their dismissal, saying that they are both still legally elected Secretary General and Treasurer of Niska. Here's more on that story.
In a statement to BCN News, Siosikefu and Kaukasitalangi confirmed that they had both received the letters from Niska, removing them from their positions. They have responded to Niska vehemently objecting to the allegations against them and challenging the process used to remove them. According to Hagen Siosikefu and Bella Kaukasitalangi, they do not accept the decision made by only 3 members of Niska Executive and that they are still the legally recognized Secretary General and Treasurer of Niska because they were elected by the Sports General Assembly, which holds the ultimate authority over the Niska Executive. Furthermore, they stated that in following with the Commonwealth Games Federation's public disclosure policy, also known as the whistleblowing policy, Hagen Siosikefu and Christabel Kaukasitalangi are prepared to release the relevant financial bank records and email discussions to prove their case and expose the level of corruption, the lack of leadership and integrity of the senior members of Niska. They claim that without doubt it was their objections to these issues that is the reason why they were removed from Niska. According to their statement, former members of the executive of Niska had resigned over their concerns at how things were being run at Niska. BCN News understands that there will be a meeting to be held tomorrow for all sports groups on the island to decide on the best way forward for Niue sports in general.
Next on our news to end off the night, on Tuesday this week was the World Press Freedom Day, a day to raise awareness and to support media freedom.
Every year, May 3rd is a day to celebrate the fundamental principles of press freedom. But it is also the time to evaluate press freedom around the world, to defend the media from attacks on their independence, and to pay tribute to journalists who have lost their lives in the exercise of their profession. The 3rd of May also acts as a reminder to governments of the need to respect their commitment to press freedom. It is also the day of reflection among media professionals about issues of press freedom and professional ethics. The theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day is Journalism Under Siege.
Before we end our news tonight, this coming Sunday will be Mother's Day and White Sunday for the children. Don't forget to spoil your mums and to wish her a happy Mother's Day. And that is our news bulletin for tonight. Wishing you all a safe weekend and a early happy Mother's Day. And a special mention to you, Mum. Happy Mother's